as always, for being with us. A lot of big things to think about right now. What's top of mind for you?
Well, the real issue that we face now, as before the COVID crisis, is how do we ramp up our productivity and production in Canada, so that that we can meet the needs of an aging population. That challenge has not changed. The question is, now that we've gone through this COVID experience, is can we take something out of this experience that will in fact accelerate our growth in the future? And that is the thing that collectively governments and business needs to think about going forward.
All right. Now, when it comes to the economy, then, and right now we got a lot of things to think about. Canadians have benefited, or the economy has benefited from getting some aid in the short term. It does look like Canadians may be taking on more debt as we continue through this this pandemic. We might be relying once again on housing for growth. There are other themes out there like immigration, which had been certainly a helper for the Canadian economy, but I guess there are some question marks about what happens in COVID. You talked about takeaways. What have been the takeaways for you so far on what we're going to have to focus on when it comes to growth?
Well, one of the things that COVID has shown us is that we have not been making the use out of digital technology that we should have been making to accelerate the quality and quantity of services we deliver, and to accelerate the productivity of our labor force. And so I think one of the things that COVID may prove beneficial is that it has shocked us as a nation to catch up, in fact, with the world in terms of our use of digital technology. And I think that could prove very beneficial. But we have to make investments to make use of that, to make use of the power of the new technologies. And what we really need is, during this period of recovery, to focus, governments need to focus their efforts on facilitating the private sector to make those investments, and making the investments themselves to move not just goods and people around, but to move electrons around this country.
Now, Mr. Dodge, some people might hear what you're saying and say, well, we do have some examples of that. We've seen it in the stock market. People are flooding money into names like Shopify, which is helping people launch businesses online as opposed to having traditional storefronts. We even just referenced there's a high-profile IPO on Bay Street this week of a company focused on payments and the future of payments. Are you suggesting, though, that we got to go a lot further down that path to really make a dent when it comes to the economy?
Absolutely. Absolutely, we do. One of the things that governments can do is to facilitate the movement of electrons a lot better. And that's a big issue. While in the center of our major cities, we're quite well served. Once you get beyond the fringe, so to speak, then it's very difficult. And we can't have improvements in education. We can't have improvements in the delivery of health care. We can't indeed allow citizens to take advantage of online improvements in online delivery of goods and services unless they have access to high quality internet. So that's a very simple thing to say. It's more difficult to deliver. And we have to think very hard about how we deliver that going forward.
And And another area, obviously, and you look at this a lot as well, our energy industry. We were having a conversation earlier in the program. I mean, if we're talking about current account deficits, you got to look to the oil industry for providing a key export, essentially, for this country, doing its fair share of lifting for the economy. There's going to be a lot more talk about, a green economy. What is your current view on the state of the oil industry in this country?
Well, the challenge that the industry has, first of all, the one we know very well, having the facilities to deliver the product offshore, because we need to rely on this in terms of export earnings. But secondly, the challenge of reducing the carbon content in production. And that's a technological challenge for that industry that they have to confront, and that requires investment in that industry as well. So, but as a nation, we can't ignore that industry and the ability of that industry to, in fact, reduce the carbon content of its production, and so the efforts of government indeed need to be focused both on getting the product to market, but also in helping firms do what they need to do to, in fact, reduce the carbon content in their product.
So just so I understand exactly what you're saying, let's say we've got a big conversation about this very issue after the throne speech. Do you feel the federal government should be having strong outreach with our existing energy industry to get these green economy goals met, as opposed to looking to, say, new players or only new players to lead us into that future?
Well, it won't be only new players by any stretch of the imagination. But yes, I mean, the government can play a facilitative role here. Part of it may be facilitating consolidation so that firms have the capital to make those investments in reducing the carbon content of their product. Yes, absolutely.
So just before I let you go, you've laid out a lot of things that we have to think about in this road ahead. In the meantime, only the COVID-19 pandemic is going to allow us to know whether or not we can start having that conversation in a bigger way. Looking at the data that you see in front of you, what do you think the outlook short term is for Canada's economy?
Well, I mean, we at Bennett Jones were pretty clear in our last outlook, and I wouldn't change this at all, is that it's going to be well into the end of 2021 before the COVID conditions, if you will allow us to get back fully to full operations in the way we had before, and that over that period there are going to be parts of the economy that really suffer. And so what we need to do, though, in those parts that are suffering, is indeed not just support them with cash, but think about what training would improve the ability of our labor force to deliver good quality services, and what physical infrastructure might indeed facilitate those sectors, in particular, tourism-related sectors, to get back to productivity. They won't get there until the threat, if you will, of COVID comes down, and that won't be in the immediate future. But let's use the time we have now to make the investments that improve the quality of the services that industry can deliver, because tourism-related industries, food and beverage, and so on, those are important industries going forward, even though they are quite restricted at the moment. So we should take the opportunity to make the investments in human and physical capital along the way that will allow these to return to productivity once indeed the fear of COVID is reduced either through a vaccine or by other means.
David, helpful context as always. Thanks very much for your time this morning.
My pleasure, John.
That's David Dodge, former Bank of Canada governor and senior advisor at Bennett Jones. Some